Hi, this is Chase Utley, and this is the Phillies Show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Phillies Show with Ruben Amaro Jr., Jim Salisbury, Todd Zolecki. Happy 4th of July weekend. Hopefully you are listening or watching us down at the shore on the beach. If you're not lucky enough to be at the shore, hopefully you are in your backyard, on your patio, on your deck, on your porch, manning the grill. You have a cocktail or a beer in your hand. Phillies-Braves open a 3-game series Friday night at Truist Park in Atlanta. Kind of a big series, relatively speaking, for early July. Who better to talk Phillies-Braves than Jeff Francoeur, former Brave, former Philly. Jeff is a Braves broadcaster. He is a national broadcaster for TBS. Super insightful, super great guy. Shares a lot of great stories of his time with the Phillies. Offers a lot of really great insight on what makes this current Phillies team great. And of course, we talk about the Braves, what they're going to need to do to catch up with the Phillies. We also get into his podcast, Pure Athlete, which is geared towards youth sports, something as near and dear to my heart. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Jeff, thanks for joining us, man. It's so great to have you on. We're going to talk some Phillies-Braves today. But first, I do want to mention you are doing this podcast called Pure Athlete. I found it about a year ago because I have an 8-year-old, 5-year-old, 1-year-old. My 8-year-old's in Little League, and it is about youth sports. Your co-host, Britt Lee, Brad Williams. Yeah, it's kind of like helping young athletes and parents kind of navigate youth sports. And it is so good and so valuable and so helpful. And I've talked to some other people about it, some other parents in the Little League that my son's in, and they've become addicts and listen to it. You have some great guests. You've had JT Realmuto on, Ryan Howard on, a lot of Philly connection people. Carly Lloyd is on, Mark DeRosa went to Penn, Matt Ryan, who went to Penn Charter. It's a lot of fun. And I imagine you have a great time doing it, and you feel like you're helping spread the message of trying to make youth sports positive and sane.
Well, for sure. And you know, I love, obviously, with Ruben was able to bring me up in 15 in Philly. And I'll say this, man, I get a lot of crap down in Atlanta for it, but you know how much I loved playing there and the way they treat the families, you know, just the whole idea was run first class. And so obviously, but the main thing is, you know, I got 4 kids of my own now, and you get into this thing and you start seeing the way that some of these other coaches and parents are, and they're screaming at 8-year-old kids and screaming at 9-year-old kids. And I'm like, what are we doing here? You know, it's like, you're not getting paid for this. You're not, you know, doing this. And it's just, I mean, it's kind of people have lost their minds. And I love giving, you know, ideas of guys like Ryan, like perfect example, Ryan Howard, right? Like he didn't go to FSU. He didn't go to, you know, one of these huge college baseball programs. You know, he just slowly developed and turned into a great baseball player. And like, let your kids develop that. Let your kids develop their passion. You know, I've told it on there. Obviously, I love baseball, but after a year, my son was like completely uninterested in the game. I found him out there, you know, looking at all the stuff and didn't care. And I'm like, bud, do you like this? And he's like, no. And like, I had to look at myself because I'm like, just because I played it, you don't have to play it. And so now he's playing lacrosse, which I know is huge up by y'all, and he loves it. I knew nothing about it. Now I'm helping his coach's lacrosse team. I've learned all this stuff, but like, he's passionate about it. So I'm like, let's do it, dude. Like he comes home from school and he has lacrosse practice. He's got his gear set out ready, dude. He'd come home for baseball practice. I'd be like, all right, let's go. And he's like, do I got to go today? You know? And it's like, but so it's like, let your kid drive the ship. Now I'm not saying don't push them. You know, you got to work, get them out there, do stuff. But at the same time, you know, I think we're just trying to give parents a way to navigate. You know, one of the first questions I ask all parents, guys, is what do you want out of sports for your kids? What do you want out of it? And like, for me, I want my kids to learn work ethic, discipline, how to be a great teammate, you know, how to come beside people. And I've always said it, like, then if you get 16, 17, 18, whatever sport, and you have an opportunity to play in college, you know, now let's look back. But there's these 10-year-old travel teams that are from Georgia going all the way out to California for 10 days. I'm like, how the hell are your parents affording this? You know?
Yeah, totally. And I thought when you do have some of these athletes on, it's amazing how a lot of them have similar stories about just not being pushed and just loving the
Well, and
game.
multi-sports, right? Like playing
multi-sports.
Matt Ryan talked about it. What made me a great quarterback, dude? I was a shortstop in high school, and he's like, happened to move side to side, being under center. He's like, all that stuff made me better at football. And now these kids are special. I mean, kids are playing 120 baseball games a year. I'm like, good Lord.
Not to mention the injury part of it too, right? Because you're doing one thing all the time, and then your body's just at that age aren't able to really, aren't able to handle that physically.
Ruben, I love that you said that. One of our most powerful ones, we had a doctor from Emory on, Dr. Neary, and he's one of the top pediatric doctors with injuries in sports. And he was saying in the last 20 years, where people used to get their first major injury at 17 is now all the way up to 12 years old because of specialization in sports. He said the kids are using the same muscles. They never get to use anything different, and it's killing them. And the parents keep wondering why, and it's like, I tell the story, Brian McCann, y'all all love Brian, what a great catcher, hard-nosed. He pulled his team off a field a few years ago because his coach had his guy throwing 120 pitches. And Brian told him, if you don't pull that guy, I'm off. I'm not watching this kid fall apart out here. And Brian pulled his team off the field.
Yeah, I mean, that those natural breaks when you had those seasons, right? You played basketball, hockey, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are really important for kids. We have the same message. My brother and I do the same sort of thing. We have the same messages, and sometimes it falls on deaf ears, man, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, right? Like when you were GM, you're not looking at some 14-year-old kid going, man, this kid, we need to keep an eye on him. Like, who cares?
No,
nobody cares.
No, correct.
It's called pure athlete, right, Jeff?
It is, yeah, pure athlete, and we've had some great guests on. So
you really have had some great and like heavy hitter guests, and they've all been really good.
I'm actually looking forward to. We're actually doing next week before the draft is Charlie Condon from University of Georgia. Who's probably either going to be the first, second, or third pick, but he's a great story, right? He was a walk-on at Georgia. I mean, that's a perfect example. This kid didn't even get a scholarship.
Great story.
Great story. And so my whole thing is I want to show parents, like, if you keep working, teach the fundamentals. Smoltzy had one of the best. We all know Smoltzy can get going, and, but I love what he said when he said, I wish more coaches at young age would have the stones. He didn't say stones, but I'm going to say stones on here.
You can say balls. You can say balls here.
All right, perfect. I wish
you talk about Jim's balls all the time.
He said, I wish more coaches had the balls to teach development over winning at a young age. And I couldn't agree more with that.
Frenchy, I just want to say it's really nice of you to name your podcast after Ruben, Pure Athlete.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. Good point.
It was in my mind.
I want to tell you a story, though. And I'm totally on board with what you're doing. Positive. You want that kid to look forward to going to the field, or going to the basketball court, the hockey rink that night, and having fun and growing as a human being. A former Philly told me a story once and this guy was booed in Philadelphia. And he said, booing don't bother me because every time I had a bad game as a kid, my father yelled at me the whole ride home. It toughened me up. How do you balance that?
Well, no, I do. I think there's got to be tough love, 100%. Like you asked my daughter, I coach her travel softball team. She's 10. And there's days she gets in the car after a game and I really don't say anything. And all of a sudden she'll be like, man, Dad, I didn't play real good. And I'm like, no, you suck today. Like, let's call it what it is. Now, does it mean I don't love you anymore? No. And if anything, it means, okay, let's go to work. But I think that's where you find out if it's really the kid's passion, Jim, or your passion. Does it my dad used to say, with my brother, he'd get in the car on the way home. And if he had a bad game, it was like, oh, well, where my dad said you would get in the car and it drove you crazy. Like you wanted to get better. And so I think that's good, right? But you don't want to just kill the kid where eventually they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Don't take that away. Teach passion, teach hard work. You come watch me coach. I practice hard, but then when the game comes along, let them go play. I mean, you know how hard it is. These parents are yelling at their kids, keep your back elbow up,
Oh my God.
I'm like, first of all, you know how hard the game is, guys. If you're sitting there thinking about all these things, you have zero chance. So it's like, let the kids at least figure it out on their own. I don't tell our kids that 10-year-old girls, I don't yell at them during the game. If there's first and second, a ball's hit, I don't tell them where to go. I want them to know where to go. We work on it. If it's hit to short, You can get a quick out at third. If not, flip it to second. Like, you want them to learn that stuff. And if that means you lose a game and you don't get a $4 ring that they buy from Amazon these tournaments, then we'll be just fine.
I mean, you make a great point, because that's one of the things that's happening in player development across baseball, where guys are not being allowed to play and figure out like where to play. They're giving them like these little cards. Okay, this is a guy. This is, instead of watching the game and saying, okay, if I'm a second baseman and I see he's a left-handed hitter and he's pulling everything, well, I'm going to slide over into the hole. Imagine that.
I was doing
it just doesn't happen anymore.
No. And I was doing the Yankees Orioles with Bob Costas a couple Tuesdays ago when Willie Mays died, right? When he passed away, we were in the 5th inning. And I remember one thing that came to my mind is, could you imagine, because we just got done showing an outfielder looking at a card. I said, could you imagine giving Willie Mays a card? And being, all right, when this guy comes up, and I think about it, for me, I played next to Andrew Jones, who I think besides Willie Mays might have been the greatest center fielder.
Agreed.
And I said, I just watched Andrew. I said, I could imagine a guy telling Andrew, you got to move over 2 steps. Like, sure, pal. All right, I'll be right on it,
Willie Mays in the 54 World Series. Let me see. Vic Wertz. How do I play Vic Wertz?
But I agree. You talk about the minor leagues, Ruben. Guys come up now, and I hear it from all sorts of I talk to the y'all's Phillies coaching staff all the time. I talk to the Braves and Mets, and the number one thing they all say is these kids don't come up and really know how to play the game, and that's the most frustrating thing to them.
Yeah, because they're not necessarily taught how to play the game; they're taught how to maximize their talent, and
exactly.
so that's a really important element. I'm not saying every organization is like that, but there are a lot of them, and there's a lot of people who are running their organizations who don't understand those at the essence of what it is to be a winning player, as opposed to just a player who's going to maximize his ability to play.
And I'll say this, you talk about the Phillies when y'all were there and you had Chase and Ryan and Jimmy and Halliday, you had people that loved baseball. People ask me about this Phillies team all the time right now for the last 2-3 years. I said, they got people that love to play. I mean, I golf with JT Realmuto all the time. They're all the Phillies are coming out to, well, I shouldn't say that, man. A few of them might be coming out to play.
Right. Got it.
They do like the golf. They do. And
they're coming out to play. I play with those guys all the time, but they love to play baseball. We get out there, and it's like, I won't bring it up specifically because I remember it's like, you're playing golf. But what do we end up talking about for 4.5 hours while we play? Baseball. And so these guys live and breathe and sleep it. Bryce Harper, I'll pay him because I know 0 for 4, it matters to him. Not the money. Yes, the money's great. He's going to make plenty, but it matters to him. Chase Utley, when he was there, he knew he was going to make plenty of money, but that son of a gun hated to lose worse than anybody. And so I said, that's the one thing the Phillies have going right now. They got people that love to play the game of baseball.
They do. I remember talking to a couple Phillies a couple springs ago, and I asked, like, who do you think in this clubhouse loves being a baseball player the most? And a couple of guys said, Kyle Schwarber, man. That guy is always talking about it. Every time I walk by Kyle Schwarber, he is literally talking about baseball. And I think there's a lot of guys in that clubhouse that do that.
We can all say we know the long-term deals the last 5 years that haven't worked out. I think, Ruben, you probably know better. You knew it was going to be a train wreck. Some of these guys hated baseball. They're not going to play unless they're 100% healthy. And so then it's like all of a sudden they're not even playing and they've made $120 million. I want to be like, did you not see that coming? Like, did you not vet them? Did you not find out if they actually like the game?
Right.
And you make a great point. You make a great point. And, some guys, get injured and it's one thing, but there are a lot of guys who you see out there who are getting paid and it's just so important. It's not necessarily about just the talent. It's about their love and passion for the game.
Yeah, I remember talking to Alex Anthopoulos about that when he signed Olsen and Riley, and he said, that's easy to me. These guys will make every dollar of it because they play. They want to play. They show up. It matters to them. They're grinding in the cage. They want to win, and I think back to last year during the playoffs when the Phillies and Braves and, the Braves weren't getting any hits and Austin Riley was trying to do anything he could to get the guys going. And I'm like, it mattered to him. He's going to be $20 million, whether he hits 180 or 320, but he cares. He cares what those numbers are. And those are the types of guys you want on your team.
Frenchy, this is a great segue because Phillies-Braves series beginning Friday night in Atlanta. Braves have some, they lost Acuna, they lost Strider. They're 9 games back in the standings as we record this. Is this a series with any significance? It's early July. Does it matter? What's the feeling like down there in Atlanta as the Phillies come to town?
Well, I would think, depending on the next 3 weeks and how that goes, this could be significant, right? Like if you can cut it back to 5 or 6 games, going into the All-Star break or August 1st, then yeah, you have somewhat of a pennant race. But you know what? The Phils are playing great baseball, and they're doing everything they need to do, and they're finally getting starting pitching. Rangers Suarez between us, and I gave Rob Thompson a hard time last postseason. We were in his office every day, and I'm like, will you just let this guy throw 7 innings? He's ready to do it. I mean, I remember people would be like, yeah, our goal's try to get him through 5. And I'm like, get him through 5. He's hit the Braves through 5 innings. Why the hell are we taking him out? But they have got great starting pitching. And then they have, what I tell people is I think Zach Wheeler is the best pitcher in baseball. I do. If I had one guy to go start a play, and it's no disrespect to Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole's probably my number 2. But if I had one guy right now to go into a playoff game, I want Zach Wheeler on that mound.
I wonder, Jeff, does it kind of eat at the Braves a little bit that, Zach Wheeler's an Atlanta kid. He actually, where your stadium is located is in Smyrna, right?
Yeah, it's only like 20 minutes from him.
Right. So he actually pitched in the Smyrna Little League.
Yeah.
Like, does it gall the Braves a little bit that they didn't make a run at him?
I would think so. But I will say this. If you think about it, the Phillies have got like a great – he's always been healthy and been able to work. With the Mets those years, he was hurt, quite a bit. And so I think when they did that sign, it's like this could either go one way or could go – it's kind of like with Alex Anthopoulos when he signed Chris Sale to that big thing. I remember the 2 years, 40, and everybody's like, man. But I thought if he's healthy, which he's done, it's worth every penny, and it has been. So I think you got to get a little luck there too. But I mean, again, he's been incredible. Aaron Nola's been so good for so long. I still remember in 2015, and I'm sure Ruben does, Aaron Nola was going to AAA, and he scrimmaged us on that backfield that day. And it was me, Chase, Ryan, all these guys. And we faced Nola, and he threw like 5 innings. And I remember Chase going, is he going to be our opening day or second behind Cole Hamels? He's like, why is this guy not with us now? And so, they just got a lot of great players. I think down here, though, it's funny. I think, Braves fans have kind of been, you know what, maybe let's finish 4th this year and try to go up to Philly and do what they've done to us the last years and keep that momentum going.
Frenchy, I'm telling you, if the Phillies meet the Braves in the NLDS, the Phillies win the division, there is going to be this – they might even talk about it in Philly, but Phillies fans are going to be nervous as hell that this layoff, from between the end of the regular season and the NLDS is going to do do to them what the Braves thought it did to them. It's going to be – it's going to be on everybody's minds, no doubt.
That's what I said. You know what? But doesn't baseball need this? Like, how perfect would that be if it happened the other way? And and here they are up in Philly game 1, and it's like, here we go, And so I told someone the other day, I think the Braves, even though the offense isn't hitting as well, they might be poised to play better in the playoffs if you have Lopez, Sale, and Fried healthy. Those 3 guys to make starts. I still tell people last year the Braves offense, what they did last year, guys, and I took a step back this year, but I did 110 games last year. It was incredible watching that night in and night out. It was like 7-8 runs every game. But then they get to the playoffs, right? And you come up to Philly for game 3. You remember they didn't even know who the starting pitcher was until like 4 hours before the game. And I'm like, That's not a good sign when you're going into a series and you don't know who your number 3 is. And Strider didn't throw bad, but he felt like he had to shut him out to win ball games at that point. So I do think the Braves pitching is better poised this year. So, it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. But, I heard Brian Snitker say that, they're not going to give in to this at all. Obviously the Phillies, have a little tougher schedule coming up. So I think that's kind of where, like I said, I think by the end of July, you'll have a good idea if this is going to be a race or if it's going to be like, the Braves are playing for that wild card spot.
Do you think, we hear a lot that quote about 4 hours of hell in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You were here for the postseason last year. What does it feel like from your perspective, the impact that stadium in full throat has on an opponent? Did it have an effect on the Braves? And could it be in their head if we see Braves Phillies 3?
I when things are going good, yes. I mean, I said it when they're hitting home runs and doing what they're doing, that place is the hardest place to play in baseball, hands down. I experienced it myself in 07, 08, 09 in those years, and Howie would come up and the bell would start ringing. I'm like, well, here it goes, and you're just like, I remember Tim Hudson admitting one time, he's like, I think you remember, I can't remember what game it was. It was late in the season, and I think he hit Chase 2 or 3 times. No, Howie hit 3 home runs that one.
Yes.
But I think Tim Hudson hit Utley twice on purpose. He said, I was just sick of hearing the fans yell, and I just thought I'd put one right in his ribs, and he's like, forget it. I was done with it. But I do think it also, though, because if you remember game 6 and 7 last year, the NLCS, when things got a little tight, those fans got quiet. And they did.
Yeah, they did.
And I think that's where the visiting team a little bit, you saw the Diamondbacks kind of take it. They started stealing bases, which we didn't see in game 1 and 2. And I'll tell you what, man, I remember going to game 7 last year, you're in the booth and it's, tight early and it was eerily quiet. Like people were nervous.
They were intense.
And they were intense and they were nervous. And, when the Diamondbacks won, I remember the first thing I did was, I'm up there with Brian Anderson, Ron Darling, and I backed my chair up because I ain't taking a beer bottle to the face. So, I know these people too well. But then, of course, my favorite part was the 45-minute ride back to the hotel where we turned on the talk radio. And I mean,
oh my goodness.
I'm just like, holy smokes, and I think the whole ride was quiet because we just kept listening to every caller call in. I've lived here 52 years. This is bullshit,
Oh yeah.
And our little runner is a kid named Noah, and he was the one that would drive us back to the hotel. Dude, this poor kid on the way home after game 7, I was just praying he didn't drive us off the bridge. He was I kept telling him, I'm like, Noah, there's brighter days ahead, buddy. It's going to be all right. You'll get back. But because he picked us up game 6, right? And it was a slam dunk. Phillies were winning. So he's like, we're partying tonight in Philly. It didn't happen. So he picks us up on game 7. I remember thinking, how you doing, Noah? And he's like, a little nervous, to be honest with you, but I'll tell you what, though, it makes it so fun to play up there. And I remember the year before, Smoltzy, of course, did all the games with Fox up there. And he's like, next year with TBS, he's like, if they're there, man. And it of course, it was awesome.
Yeah. It's electric.
It's awesome, right? Ruben knows this. It's awesome till it's not.
Yeah.
It's not awesome.
Yeah, you're right about that.
One night, Frenchy, when Jimmy Rollins had his big hit against Broxton back in, was that 9?
09
Yep.
NLCS.
Ruben was in his executive suite, and he jumped up on the counter and was cheering so hard he almost fell out into the crowd.
Well, they would have just crowd surfed him at that point.
I was big then. I was big for a minute. They liked me for a minute.
They would have patted him on the back then. A few years later, they would have punched him in the mouth.
That's right.
Speaking of that, I was looking up the numbers after we signed you in, I guess, the offseason of 2014, and you came to Philadelphia. Actually, I was looking up your numbers. You actually had a pretty good year that year, and you were sort of kind of bouncing around at that point, right? You played for several different ball clubs, but it was nice to have you. And one of the reasons why I did sign you is because I knew, what you were about and what your makeup was about and who you were as a clubhouse, leader type of a guy. And so we had started to go into that transition of very younger players. And then I got let go, but I was looking at the numbers after I got let go. This is where I feel like you had some empathy for me, my friend. After I got let go, you really struggled. You weren't playing like every day anymore. It's like you were 9 for 48 with like a 188 average. I'm like, before that, you were, you had a really good year going, and then I was gone, and you were like, oh man, I lost my guy Rube.
Well, and you say that, but we knew each other really well. I knew Charlie really well. We went to camp, and me and Howie worked with Charlie religiously on those backfields. And I always appreciated, because when I'd come up and play, Charlie would talk hitting with me all the time, man. And we always talk about Charlie loving home runs. There'd be like a game, maybe we'd be down 6-1 versus the Phillies, and I'd be on deck, and it'd be like the 8th inning. Game's pretty much over. And I remember Charlie would look at me, kind of would make eye contact, and he'd be like hit a home run, let me see something, and I always appreciate it. But I felt comfortable there, and Ruben, I'll say this, y'all made me feel needed. I helped those young guys. When I was playing well, I got to run out there. And when all that kind of, we had talked a little bit before Ruben, was let go about coming back for a year or two. And so I played with a purpose. And then after that, it's kind of like they're going to completely change this thing. And I knew I wasn't coming back. And that sucked because I told you, I enjoyed my time up there. Todd, Jim, y'all talked to me all the time. You knew it. Like, yeah. I served like, man, I knew when I wasn't playing that, between Sandberg and Pete, it was like, hey guys, if it's a 6th, 7th, 8th inning and there's a big moment, you're our pinch hitter. Like, you're our guy that's going up there to deliver a big knock, and as a player, I took pride in that. I would go down, work, get ready, get my thing in. And when that kind of hit and it was change, I'll be honest, the last month kind of sucked, man, because I knew I was on my way out after the season. And, I didn't really want to be. I'd made that known, but, they went in a different way. And, that was that. But I loved it. I remember Ruben talking on the phone. And he said, look, if you come to camp and do what you should be on this team and you should make a difference. And so I went to camp, put all the work in and played a big part, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Frenchy, you also had a good ERA.
Well, for one inning. I tell people that story all the time because it's one of my favorite, because we'd given up. Jerome Williams started that game. And remember, if you go look, I think at the box score, we gave up a run every inning until the 7th when this guy came in and went 1, 2, 3. And I remember I'd throw in 11 or 12 pitches, and I come walking in chest high, I remember Cole and Aaron Harang and those guys were sitting there, and I'm like, guys, it's not that hard. You just got to throw strikes. And I remember, but I thought I was done, right? And Rhino comes down. He's like, dude, that was solid. You got one more inning in you. And I'm like, one more inning, I can go 9. Like, let's do this thing. And so I remember I was throwing 90 to 91 and had the 2-seamer rolling in there, but I sat down for those 15, 20 minutes, right? Well, I forgot that when you sit down and lose all that momentum and then go back out, like, that's why starters are starters and relievers are relievers. And dude, I'll never forget. I went back out there, and it was a disaster. The first pitch I threw, if you remember at Camden Yards, it would shoot up like what it was. And Ryan Flaherty hit a home run off first pitch I threw in that 2nd inning, and it said change up 83. And I was like, no, that was my fastball. Like, I was just my beat. And then of course, freaking Chase is about to get into it, with pitching coach. And it was just like with McClure. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not good.
Frenchy, and you got to tell, you told me this once, like, you actually snuck up into the clubhouse before that inning and did something. Give us that.
The only time, I've actually, when I was in Philly, I can't remember where we were the year, but I broke a young kid's phone. I'm not going to say who it was, but we got in after the game, and the first thing they did, we got smoked, and he was looking at his phone, and I threw it on the ground, and then I handed him $300, and I felt bad, but I was like, go buy one. I'm sick of watching it, because again, it mattered to me. I cared. I knew we weren't the most talented team, but I don't want to get our face beat in, right? Like, let's get after it. And so I never had my phone, but I remember the only time in my life I called my wife and I said, call my mom and dad, tell them I'm coming in the 7th inning. Make sure they're not to DVR. That was about the 5th inning. And so I remember the 6th inning, trotting out there, warming up, man, my heart was pounding. I was ready to go. But yeah, the only time I ever went to my phone, and that's why actually when my wife answered, she thought like something was seriously wrong. Cause she knows by 5 o'clock, I can't get in touch with Jeff. My phone's up. Like, if I need someone, I'll call the clubhouse guy, right? Like, but that was, and then I always tell people the funniest part is, if you remember, that was on a Tuesday night, and then we came home to play the Orioles on a Wednesday and Thursday, and yeah. I'll never forget that Ryan Sandberg was like, my left ass cheek was hurting so bad. I threw 48 pitches landing on it, and I couldn't walk. And so I remember we take the train back home, and I was walking all crippled to the train because my ass cheek hurt so bad already. And I remember Rhino going, you don't have to do anything tomorrow. Like, you have taken it for the team. You don't have to hit. You don't have to do anything. I'm like, thank God. Like, I didn't want to do it. So I get to the field the next day. I literally, I think I spent 2 hours in the hot tub. I think the massage guy massaged my tail, for me. Like, it was just, I wanted nothing. But then what happens is we get to the 9th inning in Philly, and I think the Orioles were up 1 or 2. And we had a base runner, and Zach Britton was pitching, the old lefty closer, nasty. Yeah. And I think me and Adubel Herrera were the only guys left on the bench. And I remember Rhino coming down to the bench to me, kind of had his head down. He's like, Frenchy, if I send Adubel Herrera up there with you on the bench, I'm going to look like the biggest idiot in Philadelphia. And I'm like, I haven't taken a swing, right, all day. And I'm like, you know what? I'll go up there. And I remember I grounded out to second. And I ran to first like Kirk Gibson in that World Series. And I was like rolling my thing down there. And everybody, of course, the game ends. It's anticlimactic. Nothing happened. But I remember walking back in the dugout, and Rhino just comes down and pats me and says, "Thanks, man. That was huge. I appreciate it." Like, I've never got congratulated for hitting a ground ball to second base to end the game. That was the first.
Frenchy, what can you tell us? During that game when you pitched, Bob McClure and Chase got into it. I mean, was that an all-timer? How many F-bombs were dropped in a minute and a half?
There were 15 F-bombs being thrown out there. And I remember Chase saying, he's done everything you've asked him to do. And I remember Bob saying, well, are you the pitching coach? I don't think so. Just play first base, because Chase was at first, that thing. And I mean, it was getting pretty serious. And I remember just finally getting between the two. And I'm like, look, stop. Like, one more hitter. I'll do one more hitter. And if I don't, luckily I got that guy out to end the inning. But man, I was like, we're going to, the season's already not going great. We're going to have Chase Utley and Bob McClure dropping down on the pitching mound going at it. And I remember looking over at Buck Showalter's in the end, because remember, that's when the Orioles, they were hot, man. They were good. That's when they had all those guys. And I remember looking over and Buck's like, what are we doing? And I just always laughed at that. Actually, the last 2-3 years when we would do a TBS game and I'd go into Buck's office, we would talk about that situation every single time. And he would just laugh.
That's awesome. I mean, it was an all-time moment, and during a really bad season that needed some levity.
It did, and don't think that every year on that day Tom McCarthy doesn't send me happy anniversary. I'm like, he doesn't know my birthday, my anniversary, but he remembers the anniversary of me pitching.
That's funny.
Frenchy, one of the kind of the characteristics of this Phillies team the last few years is their resilience, their toughness, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they lost Harper for a couple stretches. In 2022, they lost him to a broken thumb, and they played 12 games over 500. So the Phillies are a resilient club. I look at this Braves team. They lose Spencer Strider, they lose Ronald Acuna. That just and the two guys at the corners are not having their big, Riley, Olsen years.
Their catcher
the Braves are still there. Yeah. They're still a good ball club. Do you give Brian Snitker a little tip of the hat for that? Because he and Rob Thompson, they kind of remind me of each other.
It's so funny. I've had so many buddies in Atlanta text me, when is Snit going to go in there and tip a table, call a team meeting this? And I said, I remember Bobby Cox, man, who how I love him like he's my second dad. And I remember he say team meeting is for losers. You have team meetings when you're losers. Like if you have the right players in that clubhouse, they will police themselves and they'll get through it. And I want to give them the opportunity. And so, when you talk about Rob Thompson, I look at him a lot and Snit when things weren't going well last 2 years for the Phillies, the first 3-4 months. It never was this like blow up the clubhouse, do it. You have confidence in those guys that they're going to pick it up and they're going to do it. And I think that's where Snit does the same, with those Braves guys. Like, look, y'all are good. You have back of baseball cards. You've done what you can do. At some point, you're going to turn it around, right? And I think that goes to show you, though, how hard the game of baseball is, man, that, guys like Austin Riley can have the year they had last year and they'll spend a month where they can't hit. And it's like, this game is so tough, man. I mean, Jackson Holiday was a perfect example of that, right? Like, I think this guy's going to be incredible, but he came up to the big leagues and they found a weakness, dude, and they exploited it. I watched numerous of those bats. They were running balls in on him, trying to get him quick on the inside and then going away. And it's like, until you figure that stuff out, but we talk about it now, right? These GMs now are given no ability to try to build something. Chris Getz, who's with the White Sox, he's one of my best friends. We play together in Kansas City. We go on vacation. I feel so bad because I'm like, are they going to give him 3 years to try to build this thing? Because it's like, you can put any manager you want with that team. They're not winning a bunch of games. They don't have the talent. And that's what, Chris told me this year. I'm trying to find out who wants to play, who can produce, and then kind of go from there. But again, so what happens, Jim? They bring all these kids up. That Braves kid, Hurston Waltrip, they brought up last month or whatever, 85 and a third innings in the minor leagues. And now you're expecting him to go get these grown men that have put these massive numbers up. It might work for an inning. It might work for 2 starts. But if they don't know how to fail and get back, it's too tough, man. This game will beat you up. I remember when I got Me and Brian McCann, our first year in minor league ball, I remember Dayton Moore, who was the Braves head of the minor leagues at that point. Dayton said, y'all are playing the whole year in Rome. I don't care if you hit 780. You're going to play the whole year in Rome. I want you to learn bus rides. I want you to learn 3-game series. I want you to learn day games at 10 o'clock in the minor leagues after, a night game. But he's like, I want you to experience a full season. So don't think just because you're doing well, we're going to move you up on the fast track. Like, you will get there when you get there. And I always appreciated that because they gave us time to go through a full season. Unfortunately, the way that these GMs and presidents now, they feel like they got a winner. They got to put you in. They don't give them time. That they rush these kids. It's Kyle Wright. Y'all watched Kyle Wright for years with the Braves. Everybody kept asking all the time, what's wrong with Kyle Wright? And I'm like, nothing's wrong. He doesn't have experience. Just because he dealt at Vanderbilt, he's got to learn how to pitch. And when he finally learned how to pitch 2 years ago, you remember what happened? 21 games. He was incredible. 95 sinking in. Obviously he got hurt. But I'm like, he finally learned how to pitch. And
that was one of the most important things when we talked about Cole Hamels and Aaron Nola. Okay, you guys can't rush these guys up there. You have to let them. They have to learn how to fail because they basically had not failed ever and bounce back from failure. I always believed in that. Let's see how this guy reacts when he gets beat up a little bit, because if he gets beat up at the major league level, he may not bounce back. He may not figure it out, and he'll be panicking instead of, unless he's got a certain level of confidence. And I think, players are being developed at the major league level now instead of being developed at the minor league level, and it's speed up baseball. And I think it's a detriment to the game.
I do too. And that's why you talk about it. I talk to Freddie Freeman about this all the time because, we talk about no time in our game has pitching been more nastier than it is now. Guys throwing 100, just balls going off the thing. But as Freddie Freeman told me, no time in our game have the pitchers ever been stupider. And he goes, right. 0-2-2-0, it doesn't matter. And I, for a perfect example, I did the Subway Series, last week and at Citi Field, and the Mets were up 9-1. It got to 9-3, bases loaded. And Reed Garrett threw 2 nasty sliders to Judge. He took them both, and now it's an 0-2 count. And then he threw a fastball at 99 out over the plate, belt high, and he hits the grand slam. And I remember thinking, I'm like, that's a layup for him. I mean, and that's what Freddie says. Whether I'm in a 2-0 count, 0-2, I feel like there's not counts anymore. Like, you just wait for that pitcher to make a mistake and you capitalize. Now, honestly, they're 2 of the better hitters in the game, but I'm just saying, these guys didn't get a chance to develop down in the minor leagues. This is how you pitch. This is what you do. So that's what's impressive when you do get a guy like a Zach Wheeler, Ronaldo Lopez, what he's doing for the Braves here. When you get stuff and the smartness they know how to pitch, they're just carving people.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
awesome.
Is Lopez going to, make it through the season? Because he's been a reliever and doesn't have that innings.
But he's been a reliever, but he's been a starter for a long time. And I think, that goes to show you sometimes, and I don't want to call anybody out, but the stupidity, the fact that this guy hasn't been a starter the whole time. Like, What are we doing? Ruben knows this. If you have anybody, if they can give me every 5 days for 30 starts, I want them doing that. They're way more valuable than one inning here and there. And so I do. Lopez is a big guy too, man. I don't think he's going to break. And I think the Braves have done a good job of, a few of the games he's pitched, he's throwing like 74, 75 pitches. And they got him out if they're up, 6-1 in the 6th inning. But I also think something that doesn't get talked about enough, and one thing I actually do like that the Braves do, is look at, Rick Kranitz, who I love Cranny, and he talks all the time about stressful pitches. And he's like, the guy's out there mowing, and that's what we talk about Wheeler, right? How many games do we watch Wheeler where he'll throw 7 innings, 110 pitches, but 0 stress? I mean, he's not worked up, doesn't care. It's nice and easy. So I don't think innings is that big of a deal compared to how stressful. So that's when we talk about young kids that come up, right? Most of those innings are stressful for these kids, man. They're trying to do it. So those are the ones you have to watch. But I don't think guys like that, I think he'll be fine.
Jeff, Alex Anthopoulos, we're big fans of him. What's he got up his sleeve later this month, trade deadline?
I'm sure something. I know everybody in Atlanta's wondering, what are you going to do? But I think one thing that he's proven is it's not always the big acquisition, right? It's the right fit. And I go back to 21 when they, won the World Series and beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers went out and got Scherzer. They got Turner. They got the big sexy names. And, who ended up being the NLCS and World Series MVPs? It was freaking Eddie Rosario and Jorge Soler, right? Like they got the right guys, and for not a lot. So I think you'll see him do something. There's a lot of talk down here with shortstop too, because Arcia, as good as he's been defensively, the bats finally kind of hit that, level a little bit. And so I think you might see an upgrade there.
I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Bichette finds his way over there. He's got some history with him too.
Exactly. And Alex knows the Toronto thing, and I think a guy like him would actually fit great in Atlanta too. And I think it would help Riley. I think it would bring an edge. Like that's what we talk about too. Like one thing the Phillies had last year, and I said this, and I think a lot of Braves fans finally realized it in that 4-game series with the edge the Phillies played with compared to the edge the Braves played with. And that's what I said. You gotta have a lot of guys that want to play and want to play the game hard. And, you look at that, what Harper and Arcia with the whole thing when he turned and looked at him. For baseball people, you look at it like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like it's nothing, but the fans rallied behind it. They thought it was the biggest deal. And so I'm like, yeah, smart. Like you got it going. You got everybody fired up, so I do think a guy like him, man, with the edge he plays at could be a great fit.
Yeah, good. I think I always believed in this. I mean, you have to have talent, but you have to have a little asshole in you too. I mean, and that's important. I think it's an important part of being.
Think about that.
You got to have a little bit of that in you, and you have to have a little bit of grind. And
I love Chase Utley. I sat at his locker numerous times and told him, "You're an asshole, man," and he's like, "I know," like he didn't care. I know, but
we had Chase on a few weeks ago, and he told some great stories. Do you have a great Chase story that you could tell us that we might not know, just of him during a game or what you admired about him?
Well, I will tell you this. One of the great Chase Utley stories I remember, and this was early on in 2006, the World Baseball Classic. And, I was on that team. He was on that team as the first World Baseball Classic, and Buck Martinez was the manager. And, you got all these superstars on there, A-Rod, Bonds, Griffey, and this. And I remember Buck Martinez telling me one time a few years later, and I didn't know this went on there, but you remember, like, that's the hard thing, right? You get all these guys. It was like he would play Kinsler one day or whoever it was, Chase the next, and there was all these things. And I remember Buck said Chase came into his office and told him, "I'm the best player on your team. You need to play me every single day." I remember Buck going, "I'm sitting here and I got, Chipper, Griffey, A-Rod, and here's this young punk comes in telling me he's the best player he's got." And that was the confidence that Chase played with. Like he got out on that field and he wanted you to know that he was the best player. And if not, he was going to show you why he was the best player. Maybe not with a hit, but the way he played, the way he, ran the bases. Like that's the one thing I always tell people about Chase Utley. I could truly say I probably never ran 100% every time I hit a ground ball. Chase Utley ran to first 100% every time he hit a ground ball. He's the only guy I've ever seen do it. And that's a fact.
He also would didn't mind getting hit by pitches as well. I mean, that guy just stood in there and got drilled.
And that was the thing that I appreciated about Jimmy and Chase, Victorino. They got up on the plate, man, and like if you got hit, you got hit. Like they were up there for a reason, right? Like they never minded getting hit. Like, hey, I'm putting a base runner on for Howie or whoever was coming up. Ibanez behind it. And so it's like, if you hit me, you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of facing the 2 or 3 guys behind me. And so again, it was a mindset. And when I look at this Phillies team, I tell people, man, last year, I was doing game 1 in Atlanta and JT hit me up and he's like, "Hey, do you want to play golf?" And I remember thinking like, well, when are the Phillies getting in town? Because y'all just, even though you won Wednesday on that thing, and he's like, yeah, the day before. And the Phillies had a workout at 4 or 5 that day. We played 27 holes. We teed off at 8:30 in the morning. I was with JT. And I'll be honest with you, this is when I was kind of like, man, the Braves could be in trouble from a standpoint of I was with JT, Stott, and Trey Turner. And it was the 4 of us playing golf, and we get done with 18. I remember thinking, well, don't y'all practice? And they kind of look at their watch like, we can squeeze 9 more. And well, you know me, I'll play golf from sun up to sundown. So let's keep it rolling, boys. And we had action going on, betting and all this stuff, and just having the best time. And then they got in the car and literally busted at the Truist Park. But for me, it was more of they've done this all year. And just because it's the playoffs, we're not going to change how we do things. And I think that's one cool thing that, like, when you would walk in, it felt like a regular season game. And when players can make it that, when managers can make it that. And I remember Brian Snitker in 19 when they got to the playoffs for St. Louis that year. And remember, they lost that game 5. Fultonevich got rocked. But I remember Snit saying, him and Alex, he finally went to him and was like, enough of these meetings, enough of this 4.5 hour going through, like, we played baseball a certain way. This is the way we need to do it. And I remember Snit saying when they went to the 21 playoffs and they made that run, like, they did the same thing that they did all season. And he said, players feel that. Players feel like, hey, there's not a lot of pressure. Rob Thompson, imagine, he knew those guys were playing. I got to the field and he asked me, how'd you do against those guys today? And so my point is, it could have been easy to say, guys, this is the playoffs. We're not taking the clubs. We're not doing this. But it's like, y'all done it all year. It's worked. You're comfortable with it. Let's keep doing it. And I appreciate that.
I totally agree.
Pretty
man.
cool stuff.
I
Hey,
think,
Frenchy, I had a quick question about this. Just you personally. I know you've done a lot of stuff in the game, played for a lot of organizations, a lot of managers, that kind of thing. Any thought that you would ever want to be back on the field in that sort of role, coach, manager, leader in some way, shape, or form?
Well, my handicap's too good right now. So go back. And then how else would I get to do this for freaking 3 weeks in July?
That's true, man.
It's a great point. You know what? I know you got young kids too.
No, and that, Ruben, I've said this, my wife has been awesome about it. She's like, when the kids get older and they're done, go coach. Do whatever you want to do. And I would love to coach, because I love, just coaching my kids. I love teaching the game, right? I love seeing them struggle with something. I love them seeing work hard and figuring it out, and the smile that lights up their face when they're like, I accomplished something, right? And so I think, I would love to do that. But right now for me, just with my kids, I always tell people this, man, I am who I am because of my dad. My dad, I tell people this all the time. My dad gave up the chance to be a superintendent in DeKalb County Schools, which is one of the biggest counties in the state of Georgia, my sophomore year of high school, because he's like, I'm not going to be able to watch my son play. And he's like, I'm going to have to be at this meeting. My sister was playing Division III college basketball at the time. And he's like, I'm not giving up. So I watched my dad give up a dream to sit here and follow me and my sister. So as when I kind of did this last year between us, we were on a 10-day road trip out west. And I was in, I think, Seattle, Oakland, San Francisco. And I remember waking up one morning and I called my wife and I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this. Like, I want to be home with our kids, coaching them, developing them. And it's actually been fun. I've gone to like 2 or 3 Braves games this year with my kids. And it's the first time I've ever watched a baseball game with my kids. And I get to point out the little, things that are going on that maybe they wouldn't notice if I wasn't there with them, and it's like, oh, I see, why did they do this? Or so, but I would love to coach someday, man. It's fun to be a part of it. It. I mean, between coaching and being in the front office, there's definitely this balance. But when you're down there on the field, man, you really feel a part of a team. And I always say this, there's no better feeling. I got to play in the World Series in 2010 with the Rangers. And it was like going through that grind of the postseason and getting to the World Series. Like, you have a bond with those guys that you'll always have. I text with Mikey Young and all those guys all the time, just from that short time in Texas.
That's awesome. Well, Frenchy, thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate the time. If you haven't checked out Pure Athlete, check it out. Seriously, it is so good. 8-year-old son for me, it's just tremendously helpful. It calms me down every once in a while. I hear these athletes talking about, and you talk about it, and your co-hosts talk about, try not to they're 8 years old, they're 9 years old. Keep it fun.
Chill out,
and chill out.
But you know what I tell all the time? Like, I was at the game actually earlier this year when, remember, Ronald Acuna dropped the fly ball in right field, like just a random fly ball. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I'm like, here, if one of the best players in all the world is doing this, how do I yell at a 10-year-old girl every once in a while if she drops the fly ball, right? Like, so it's been fun. I will tell you, I have to interrupt my vacation next week, because I will be up in Philly with Brian Anderson for the Dodgers Phillies Tuesday night.
Oh, great.
So you make sure to tell Frank 2 scoops that I want 3 scoops of cookies and cream. He better have cookies and cream out next Tuesday night. I'm going to crush him.
We'll work on it. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks again, Frank.
Make sure you pick up a couple of grouper and send them to us when you go fishing today.
You know what?
Let's go.
Thanks again to Jeff Francoeur. The Phillies Show will be back on Monday. Thanks, everybody. This is The Phillies Show. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Phillies Show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. If you like what we do, give us a review. Tell a friend. Catch Ruben, Jim, and me on Phillies Nation TV, presented by Valley Forge Tourism. New episodes air an hour before every Saturday Phillies game on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Replays air throughout the week and on PhilliesNation.com. Get more of Ruben's analysis during, before, and after Phillies games on NBC Sports Philadelphia, on the Sports Radio 94 WIP Morning Show, and MLB Network. Read Jim at the All City Network at allphly.com. Find more of me at MLB.com, the Phillies Beat newsletter, and occasionally on MLB Network.